Okay, so this is the video lesson for topic 3.0, the context of the rise of nation states and land empires. And our essential question that we're going to be answering at the end of this lesson is to be able to explain the context for the development and the consolidation of nation states and land empires from 1450 to 1750. So we have now entered a new time period. This time period, 1450 to 1750, is very similar to the time period that we just got out of. But it also has some very important developments and events that are going to go a long way toward changing the world, but also establishing certain things that we see in the world today. So, one of the main things that happen and the defining characteristic of the time period is going to be the creation of a global network of exchange. As you can see by this map, we see trade routes not only working through Afro Eurasia, but also connecting the Americas into this huge worldwide network of exchanges. A little bit closer look at this map shows that one of the driving things in this global network of exchange was silver. Silver is found in the Americas, both in what's now Mexico and South America, and it travels across the Atlantic Ocean into Afro-Eurasia, where it's used to buy luxury goods and commodities from Mughal India and China. And these things travel back into Europe, and the whole process starts all over again. So, the main thing that's happening is this overall global network of exchange that was created by the age of exploration. So, in this time period, we're going to divide this into two units of study, two focuses. First, the unit that we're starting is land based empires. Between 1450 and 1750, land based empires and nation states, they're going to begin to develop and consolidate their power. The next unit that will start probably in the end of October, the beginning of November, is looking at the workings of this global network of exchange to see how maritime empires developed and to also see how this economic exchange led to cultural exchanges and biologic exchanges. So, our unit focuses on land based empires. So, our essential question for the unit by the end of this unit, you need to be able to explain, well, how did nation states and land empires develop? And how did they consolidate their power from 1450 to 1750? So, in looking at this question, we have some things that we know, but we have some things we don't know. So, the first thing we know is basically that from 1450 to 1750, new nation states and land empires relied upon gunpowder cannons and armed trade to fulfill their economic goals. These new states legitimized their power through religion, art, and monumental structures. They consolidated their rule using professional bureaucracies and professional militaries, and financed their rule through innovative taxing systems. So we know that today we're going to contextualize that thesis statement. So, what do we know about 1450? 1450 basically is the transition. So we know the plagues involved. All the states that we talked about in the tapestry, ranging from Song China through the trading states in India into the trading states in sub Saharan Africa, well, they're gone. And the reason why they're gone is the effects of the Black Death and the collapse of the Silk Road as a trade route due to the collapse of the Mongols. So we see this great pause in exchanges. We also know about who we're talking about: land empires and nation states. Now, we know land empires are basically these ideas, these large land empires that are ruled by a very powerful leader and are very diverse in their population makeup, because we studied that in the global tapestry. So that hasn't changed. But we see the rise of these new type of states called nation states. A nation state, when we look at it, first of all, only occurs in Europe. So our examples could be England, France, Spain, and Portugal. And essentially, what brings these people together is a common cultural heritage, a history. For example, when we talk about the French, they all descend from a tribe that migrated to the area that becomes France and eventually create a nation. England, the same thing. Okay. The Anglos and the Saxons migrated there and created England. Now, Spain and Portugal is the same situation, but they're the Ostrogoths. Now, the main idea here is instead of unifying a diverse population, we're unifying a culturally common population by this common history or heritage. The second characteristic of a nation state is they all have an absolute leader who is sovereign. Now, what we mean by sovereign here is independent, totally powerful. So when you talk about the king and the queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, when you talk about the king of France, who there's too many to mention by name, or you talk about the king or the queen of England, okay, they're absolute and they're independent of anybody else, such as the church or the nobles, and they have total power. The third characteristic that defines a nation state is a border. Now, land empires didn't really have borders, they just kind of faded away. But a nation state has dead specific borders that we can see by this map. You could literally stand 1 foot in France and 1 foot in Spain, or 1 foot in Portugal, 1 foot in Spain, and so forth and so on. Now, the other ones on the map, Denmark, Norway, Holy Roman Empire, and places like that, we're not going to really involve ourselves with those. We're focusing on the states of England, France, Spain, and Portugal. Now, because our question asking us to contextualize the rise and the consolidation of both these land empires and states, I think it would be important to review what context is. Context is the setting for the development or the event that you're talking about. So what we're talking about is the development and the consolidation of nation states and land empires. So what was the world setting for it? So achieve context, the very first thing we are supposed to do is, number one, describe the setting. Number two, we have to explicitly connect the development, the rise, and the consolidation of land empires and nation states to the overall setting. So just stopping right here, the overall setting would be describing this brand new global network of exchange. And the second thing we would have to do is we would have to explain how nation states and land empires, their development and their consolidation, how do they fit into that global network of exchange? Now, I'm going to add a third thing now. The other thing that you need to do is to specifically describe the development or the event. So just to review here, what I'm asking you to learn is, number one, to be able to describe the setting. What is this global network of communication and exchange all about? Secondly, how do land empires and nation states connect to that global trade? And the third thing is we need a description of what exactly we mean by a nation state and a land empire. So to go into a little bit of detail, when we answer this question, explain the context for the development and the consolidation of nation states and land empires, we have to make sure, first of all, that we describe the global. So the global involves the global network of exchange. So as I said before, this global trade is going to be based on the flow of silver. We have the global flow of silver, and most of that silver is going into India and going into China. What the Europeans desire the most is spices. Yes, there was some silk. Yes, there's some porcelain. Okay, I'll give you that tea was there. But spices are going to be the biggest thing that are demanded during this time period. And this is also going to lead to some cultural and biological exchanges. So that is a good description of what's going on in the global between 1450 and 1750. Now we got to describe the development, and specifically what we're describing is the rise of nation states and land empires. Well, what we mean by that is that these are areas that are created through gunpowder. Not gunpowder to defend, but the use of weapons, especially cannons, to expand. That secondly, they're going to develop means of legitimacy. They're going to develop elite bureaucracies, and they're going to pay for this through innovations in taxation. So they're going to be very powerful. Now, what the connection is that nation states and land empires were not only the creators of the global network, but they were also the operators. So let's walk through that again. When we talk about context, okay, we're describing the setting. So that's the description of the network of communication and exchange. Second, we're connecting the development or the event to the setting. Well, we established before that the connection is that these land empires and nation states, they not only were the builders, but they were the operators within this global network of exchange. And finally, we're going to describe land empires and nation states, how they expanded using gunpowder, how they developed governments that are going to efficiently rule, and how they came up with innovations in taxation. So this is the answer to our essential question, explain the context.